you build like change password and recover password, and the next phase you build create an account and whatever. So you can build little pieces. But if you have standard components, then it's configuring those components and integrating them in and testing that they're integrated right is all you're doing, and you're not building them, which of course is going to make you a lot faster, right? So by implementing these security stories with test-driven development, we can try to avoid the common problems that we're seeing. So this chart is the same chart that Jeff used yesterday in the SAPI project. It's the same thing. We're trying to avoid missing security controls, broken controls, controls that are ignored, and controls that are not used right. So if you've got a test suite for your standard security component, or you build the test suite before you build the component, then you can avoid clearly the missing and broken part, and then just good design can help you make sure that the developers aren't ignoring it and misusing it. And of course, test cases can also verify that they're not ignoring it or using it incorrectly, because the test case should verify that the mechanism actually works. So how do you do test cases for security controls? Well, for standalone components, a lot of time you can build test cases for them. And in fact, we've proven that you can do it at least to some degree with the SAPI, because the SAPI was built with test-driven development in mind. So we've built over 600 test cases as part of the construction of a SAPI. And that's been incredibly useful for us, not only for building it in the first place, but as we make changes, and Jeff Williams is in the room, I think he's in the room, I thought I saw him come in. Yep. As he's making changes, re-architecting the internals and making it more efficient and more modular and easier to use, those test cases have saved him countless times from introducing subtle flaws or bugs that he might not have noticed if he had not had that huge test case to support the work that he's been doing. So we've seen that you can do it. And once you've got that, then think about that. You as a developer, when you bring in the component in your project, you can run the base test suite to make sure you didn't break anything in terms of the core components. And then you need to build your own test cases on top to make sure that you're actually using the components correctly and where they need to be used. But imagine if you've got that test suite built, then imagine over time as you continue to manage and maintain your application, you're probably going to move stuff around and you're going to break the way you use certain components, and those tests are going to go, whoops, you just screwed up the access control on that thing, it doesn't work anymore. Oh, I got to go back and fix it, as an example. So not only does it help you with maintenance, but this is a huge benefit in terms of assurance. So I mean, this lends itself towards a model where we can build security into an agile project with high assurance, just like we can build high functional assurance through agile with test-driven development. So when you're building these test cases as the developer, you need to build the functional test cases for functional security components, like does it actually log something? So you would build a test case that says, I generate an event, it causes a security event, and then I verify that this entry showed up in the log, as an example. You should try to build security test cases for things that it shouldn't do, which is obviously harder. Developers are not used to writing negative test cases. It's hard to test for all the things that something shouldn't be able to do. And we recognize that, right? So they should do the best they can. Again, this regression testing is really useful. And then I think some independent security testing is, of course, worth considering, again, depending on the importance of the application. So that independent tester that I mentioned before that you need for all non-functional requirements, they should be doing security testing. And so if they can literally be doing at least a little bit of security testing in every sprint, you can catch things earlier, which is obviously cheaper. That's the whole model. We're trying to, in everything Owasp is doing, we're trying to say push left, push left. So the earlier you can find problems, the cheaper it is to fix them. So again, you may not have an external security testing resource that is available, right? You either may not have one at all, or that person is so busy that you can't apply them to your particular project. And so that goes back to your sort of risk management for your entire application. If your application is like the critical app that your whole business runs on, then that guy's probably going to be priority is to work on your project. If you're doing it on some less important application, maybe that step in your process just doesn't happen on that particular project.
Are there methodologies available though for those that type of testing?
For security testing? Sorry.
Testing that people shouldn't be expected to follow.
Yeah, OWASP has a security testing guide, and they actually have a code analysis guide too. So, I mean, the best resource that's publicly available that I am aware of is those two right now. And then, I mean, there's lots of books and tons of, and there's tools, and I'll talk about tools a little bit in a second. So, but at least the published documents on how to do security testing, the OWASP testing guide is probably the biggest resource available today.
The tools can't do the business logic.
Absolutely, right. I mean, I'll talk about tools later a little bit. I think there's a place for tools, but there's a lot of things they can't test for, of course.
So I've looked at the Owasp testing guide, but
Yeah.
it is not at all tailored to agile practices. It's more, I don't think it's got an agile flavor in it. So I've gone through it as a group.
It's definitely not focused on any particular development paradigm, right? So it just says, if you want to test for this problem, like cross-site scripting or SQL injection or access control, this is how you do it, right? It's not focused on any particular paradigm. Yes, that's right. That's right. So if you decide the way you prioritize your tasks that you want to have a whole sprint focused on security, that would be great. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd never have to do it. And you just plow on building functionality, and you would use your standard components, and you wouldn't slow down that much to build security into your application. I'm not going to say you're going to get security for free. It's never going to be for free. Our goal is to get it to be as reasonably inexpensive and as reasonably non-obtrusive to the process as we can possibly get.
Just an observation, in past successes that I've seen, no one is actually building an application that stands alone. It fits into some context. So
right.
Rather than saying, oh, this is the security stuff you got to do, I've seen successful scenarios, say in like a broker workstation, where you have a portal structure, regardless of how you implement it,
right.
and it has rules about how you may play in that space. And guess what? Half of them are security or identity related, but they can't get in unless they do it. So I wasn't the bad cop. I was just helping them to get into the real world. So maybe that's an approach that, and you could have a sprint. I'm not, you could have a sprint where you talk about, let's create the structure that we're going to be in, or let's create the user story about how you get into the structure or something.
Well, I really think that when you're doing at the very beginning, when you're thinking about the application and the functionality, you're clearly thinking about the environment it's going to go in and the infrastructure it's going to be placed in, right? So we do a lot of work with big financial clients, and they have most of them have a very significant infrastructure. And it's not just security, it's thou shalt use WebSphere, and thou shalt use whatever, and there's a huge litany of thou shalts do, right? So when you're building an Agile app in those environments, clearly you have to take that into account, otherwise you're going to completely fail, it just won't drop in. Well, so as part of that, of course, it's got all kinds of security features in it. It typically has authentication. It typically has an authorization system, which you, of course, have to configure to make sense for your app, but it's there. So clear, and when I say standard components, that's what I mean. If your environment does some standard security stuff, use it, right? And the more standard stuff that just comes with it, the less you got to worry about when you do development, right?
That's especially in the case of SOA security, where you're linking to a security service.
Yeah, I mean, when you move into a true services-oriented world, like SOA, and web services may or may not be in a services world, but in a SOA environment where you've got standard security components, you're more and more encouraged. So I've actually worked with a defense contractor, for example, and they're